This is episode 36 with David Parrish. David he runs a successful YouTube channel where he discusses topics like awakening and his spiritual practice and meditation techniques. I don't know what you'd suggest his job title would be. I know he's a psychologist, but also meditation coach, and I think to some degree a spiritual leader, I would say. Um, in this interview, we discuss a lot of we discuss his awakening, what got him from where he was to where he is now, his general kind of teachings, and also we go into some meditational techniques as well. You have to bear with us in this interview because I think the internet was quite bad, so he kept dropping out as we were talking, and we had the video going. So in the end, we actually turned the video off and just stuck with audio. So bear with us because there are some points that are quite difficult to hear, but it does get better as the interview goes on. I'm recording this at the moment. I'm actually in the Apple Store, and the reason I haven't posted this for 2 weeks, because this interview was over 2 weeks ago, is because in the meantime I've broke the screen on my Mac. Luckily, I had this interview with David, and he's taught me to be calm, just take life for what it is. Things like this happen, it is what it is, and it's just one of those things. It's going to cost me quite a lot of money to fix. I'm actually in here now getting it fixed, and I've managed to plug my computer into into one of their external screens, and I'm actually in the store editing as we speak, and getting ready to post this. So yeah, not had the greatest fortune here, but it is what it is. But yeah, as always, please like, share and subscribe. I know you're going to like this one. David is absolutely quality. I loved having this conversation with him, and I'm really, really happy to share it, albeit 2 weeks late. But yeah, please give it a go and let me know your thoughts. Thank you. David, really appreciate you joining me today. We've been back and forth for about 3 weeks. Seems you've been quite busy. Unfortunately, we had a touch of the COVID as well during the time of speaking, but it looks like you've bounced back now, and yeah, it's really good to have you on.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
We so I've messaged you a few times about your work. I've got to say, firstly, I'm a big fan, but secondly, I found you at like the right time. Like it just happened, and I've binged through a load of your videos. I've actually shared a few with quite a few of my friends as well, who are, kind of on this sort of journey, and the response has been amazing. So I'm looking at your channel, I'm thinking this guy's gonna definitely blow up, even though I can see you've actually been doing it for a long time. So maybe now the world's ready for your message. I don't know how these things work, but I would imagine that eventually your channel will just get bigger and bigger. So it's good to get you on now. Hope to sort of spread the word and sort of share your message, really.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I have been doing it for a while, and I haven't really been doing it to get attention per se. I haven't been trying to build the channel. I started the channel for my meditation class that I was doing so that the students could have some talks to listen to other than the talks that I was giving in the class, and it took off from there.
When looking at your stuff, I mean, I sort of listen to you as a person that really understands what they're doing. Like they really get it. It's not forced. It's not something you've just learned. It seems to me like it's something that, you've been on this journey for quite a long time. So what I'm interested in understanding is kind of what got you into this, how long ago, and any kind of words of wisdom to people that are just starting to wake up or starting to get more into practicing some sort of a meditation. And I don't know, maybe they're looking at it as such a long journey from kind of where they are today.
Well, I started to get interested in consciousness and meditation when I was very, very young, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And, it was back in mid 60s, early 70s. So, you couldn't tell it by looking at me now, but I had a ponytail, I had long hair back then, and I was a typical hippie guy. And, you know, uh, I came across LSD and started to uh, take LSD for recreational purposes. I didn't really understand LSD. I just took it to get high, like most of the people were doing in those days. But for some reason, when I took it, it was high. For some reason, a profound shift in consciousness. And I didn't know what happened. I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to me. But it was clearly very, very different. I felt this sense of freedom. I felt this sense that although the world was the same as it always was, it was completely different at the same time. And it just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't feel the anxiety that I had. I didn't feel any of the pressure of the stress of life. Everything just seemed to be fresh, and everything just seemed to be easy and enjoyable and pleasurable and interesting and exciting. And so I attributed that to the LSD. And I thought, wow, this is some powerful stuff, LSD. And so I took it a few more times, but anybody that has been involved with psychedelics knows that there is a um, tolerance that builds up if you continue to take psychedelics, and so the effect gets less and less. So I kind of lost interest in that. And then around the same time, I got involved with some Kundalini yoga people. Started hanging out in an ashram, doing some meditation with them and some yoga, and it was interesting, exciting, and I had some interesting experiences there, but nothing compared to what happened with the LSD. And then I got completely involved in my personal life. My marriage wasn't very successful. Went through a time living with a few other people in a group marriage, thinking that this was a creative way of dealing with marriage, and that blew up, and that didn't work out. And so I was kind of feeling desperate, really knowing what to do. And I got a job in a maximum security prison as a teacher, and so the maximum security prison was in the city that I was in at the time, and I had seen the prison from outside. They had these big 30-foot walls. It was built in Egyptian architecture, so it was a very old prison. It was the oldest penitentiaries in the United States. So when I got a job there, that was a mind-blowing experience to go inside. And this was back in the early 70s, before a lot of the changes and corrections had taken place. So it was a wild situation to be witnessing every single day, seeing violence every day, seeing people being stabbed, seeing the brutality between the correct officers, the guards, and the inmates, and so forth. So around that time, I discovered EST, Earhart Seminars training. It was a very big fad thing back in the early 70s. I thought it was very interesting. So I went into New York City and did the S training, which was created by Werner Earhart. And after the S training, that was a 60-hour intense experience. I experienced another profound transformation there. I just knew that something had shifted during the time that I was doing that training. And I this relief, this sense of life as being easy and exciting. So I thought it would be interesting to try and do this with the maximum security inmates in the prison that I was working in. So I got permission to do that. And the only place that was available to do it was Death House, which was a separate compound. They locked people who were waiting to be executed. So in the back room of that compound was the electric chair, and they said only that they could give me a place to do this with the inmates would be in that compound, and they couldn't provide any guards. They didn't have guards available, so they had to lock me in with the inmates during the time that I was doing it. So I did that, and I let inmates participate in purposely motorcycle gangs, others were mafia bosses, others were black militant leaders, and I kind of put them all together in one room. I look back at it, I can't believe I was that crazy at the time, but I put them all in one room and we were locked in together, and we did a full week of intense work together. And I had gone into New York to memorize the S training, and I went to New York and I'm assisting the S trainings there, memorizing the material, and then came back, got permission from Werner Erhard to do it in the prison. And I did it 3 times in the prison with groups of inmates, about 35 inmates at a time. And many of the inmates had this experience, and it was really interesting to me. One of them, for example, was a guy who was a motorcycle president of a motorcycle gang, and he was in prison for murder. And he looked the part, you know, he had long hair, he had tattoos, and he had a beard, and he was really rough looking, and, you know, everybody was afraid of him. But he was a bright guy. They called him Chemo because he had been in college, chemistry major, and he dropped out of college, became a biker, but he knew chemistry, so he knew how to make methamphetamine, which the bikers used to make and sell for money. And so he did this version of the S training that I was doing. I called it the impact training. And afterwards, he said that he had a profound shift in his experience, changed his outlook on everything, and he changed his behavior, became a model inmate, and then ended up getting paroled. And when he got paroled, the Department of Corrections, because he had been such a model inmate, after he got paroled, the Department of Corrections gave him a job as a gang intervention specialist. And so he had a career in corrections after he was paroled from prison, and he worked for the next 15 or 20 years for the Department of Corrections and had a successful career. And one day, what happened when I was doing this at the prison was that eventually the administrator of the prison told me to stop doing it. And I said, why? Then he said, because the guys in the program get very quiet, and we don't like inmates that are too quiet. We think they may be planning something. And so he said, stop doing it, right? So that's when I decided to become an administrator. It took me 12 years, but 12 years later, I was in charge of my own prison. And when I became in charge of my own prison, I went back and did the newer version of the S training, which is called the Landmark Forum. And that was an updated version of the S training. And so I went and I memorized that, and then into the prison and started to deliver that in the prison chapel to groups of inmates. And of course, now there was an administrator to tell me that I couldn't do it anymore. So I did it. And I created an area of the prison that inmates could live together if they did the training with me, so they could share their understandings and support each other and pro-social behaviors and so forth. It was successful. So after that, I left. I retired from the career that I had in corrections. After I retired, I was offered the opportunity to become a Landmark Forum leader, to work for Landmark, which is an international training organization that provides this training around the world. So I started to do the training with them to become a Landmark Forum leader, and then it just didn't feel right for me. It didn't feel like this was the appropriate thing for me to do, so I pulled out of that. And I was just doing private practice as a psychologist, because I had gotten licensed as a psychologist and gone to graduate school while I was working in the prison system. And I was just doing private practice as a psychologist, and I was studying meditation and practicing meditation. I had been practicing meditation over all the years, 32 years that I was working in the prison system. I had been practicing meditation, and I would bring meditation to and teach the inmates meditation and so forth. So after I retired, I continued to practice meditation, and then I would go to the local YMCA to exercise, and I decided to see if I could teach a meditation class there. So I started to teach a meditation class there. So if you look at my videos on YouTube, you see that there are exercise machines in the background and you gym environment, right? Because all those videos were done at the YMCA where I was teaching the meditation class. And when I started to teach the meditation class, I had started to really spend more time sitting in meditation and reading about meditation and studying Zen meditation and Vipassana meditation. And I went away for a 10-day retreat to learn Vipassana meditation, which was very intense. In the Vipassana, they sit for 1 hour at a time. And if you go to the 10-day training they offer, you sit about 8 or 9 hours a day for 10 days in silence. And so it was pretty intense. After I got back from that, I noticed that there was something that had shifted in my awareness. I wasn't clear exactly what it was, but it felt good. And then I started to experience, and I talk about this in the book that I wrote. I wrote this book for the class, the meditation class, to be kind of like a textbook for the class. And in this book, which is available on Amazon, it's called Dying to Live.
Yeah.
Available on Amazon, audiobook and a paperback. And when I wrote this, if I had this experience from the Vipassana course, I started to experience this feeling that I was dying. And it wasn't because there was anything
could I just interrupt you?
I had the feeling that I was definitely dying, that my life was going to come to an end soon. And I didn't know what to make of it. I shared it with my wife and I said, I don't understand this, but it really feels real, like I'm dying. Right? And then one day, went on for, about a month or 6 weeks, I started to stay up all night. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't sleep. I had this very intense energy and just feeling like my life was about to come to an end. And then all of a sudden, I had this experience where I recognized that, wait a minute, if I were to die, what would die? And what occurred to me was what would die would be my personality. And my personality was this character that I was playing in my life that had a name and a story and all the rest of it. And that's what would die. That's what occurred to me with that would die. And as I got that my personality is what would die, the death experience stopped. And I felt like something had died, and I felt like I was still here, but I wasn't a personality anymore. And so I was still here, experiencing this very clear state, this very rich state, this very profound state of being happy and satisfied and complete and fulfilled and at peace and so forth and so on. And so as I continued to talk about this in my meditation classes and continued to practice meditation, it actually deepened for me. And I found that I no longer had the questions that I used to have about life or about consciousness or about myself. Everything seemed to be really obvious to me, very obvious to me. And so as I spoke to the students in the class, I started to record the talks so the students could have access to the talks after the class. And this went on for years until it got to the point where at this point, I think there's 610 or 15 talks that are on the YouTube channel. And the talks just kept coming. I found that when I was with the class, if I just relaxed and focused on my intention, which was to share this experience I was having, that what came out of my mouth just came out of my mouth naturally. It wasn't something I prepared. It wasn't anything that I thought about. And I found I was learning from what I was saying myself. I would go home and listen, and I would edit the videos that I was taking. During the time that I was editing the videos, I would find I was learning from what the guy in the videos was saying. Even though that was me, but what was coming out of my mouth wasn't coming from, it didn't seem like it was coming from me. It just seemed to come out naturally. And that continued to happen, for years. And so you know, I wrote the book to share this is the story that I just told you in summary, and then went on in the book to continue to share about some of the primary things that I was seeing, that I was talking about to the students in the class. And then I interested in Zen, and I went up to Ithaca, New York, because I had heard about a guy that was a Zen teacher there, that had a near-death experience because he had renal failure, and he was in the process of dying from renal failure. And turned out that one of his students gave him a kidney, and so that ended that process. But he seemed like a very interesting character, so I went up to Ithaca to meet him, and I did a Zen retreat up in Ithaca with him. It was very profound because when I met with him, he had been practicing Zen meditation for over 30 years with his teacher, who was a famous Zen teacher from Japan. And so I was a little intimidated about that, and you know, thinking, well, you know, my teacher is he a teacher? How do I talk to him? You know, and so the first time we sat down together, in the retreat, you would have time every day to sit with the teacher and talk and ask questions. And the first time we sat down together alone, I had nothing to say. I just sat there and smiled at him. And he smiled back at me and said, "Oh, we're just old Dharma brothers, you and I, just old Dharma brothers." And after that, him and I bonded, and we just felt this very pure connection between the two of us. And since that time, I've been going back up there to practice meditation with him and study with him and learn things from him. You know, he has a book out himself that is a collection of his talks that he gives in retreats, and so, that's kind of brings us up to where we are at this point. It just continues to go on. This process just continues to go on every day. It seems like it's a new, deeper reality that continues to reveal itself to me, and so that's the basis for the talks that I give on the YouTube channel. And then recently, for what reason I don't know, you said it might have been because the time is ready for people to hear what I have to share. But recently I did one of the videos, and all of a sudden I started to notice that the numbers of people viewing the video was like jumping high every day. And I looked at it this morning, it was up to 136,000 views. I used to get maybe a couple of 100, 300, 400 views in my videos, right? After that happened, now the number of subscribers to the YouTube channel, you know, I used to think, wow, if I were to get 1,000 subscribers, that's pretty cool, because I'm not, you know, trying to promote it or anything like that. And it's up to 10,000 subscribers now in a very short period of time. And the videos that I posted up there are averaging, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4,000 views. So something is happening, and I assume that what it is I'm getting a little better at sharing what I'm talking about, and people are getting a little better at hearing what I'm saying. I know in my private practice as a psychologist has changed dramatically, because I realized that what I was practicing prior to the waking up experience that I had, I was practicing conventional approach to psychology, which was that you're treating the person, you're treating the personality, right? But after I had the experience, I realized that personality isn't real. And the biggest problem that people have is believing that there's something that's not real. And so my whole practice changed. And now when I work with people that come to see me with the typical problems like anxiety or depression, I help them to start to understand the truth, which is that you're not who you thought you were. You're not your personality. You're not a physical body. You are awareness itself. And I have found that some of the clients that I have worked that way, you know, didn't get it, you know, that it wasn't what they were looking for. And so I started to really work with people, when I started to meet people and really find out whether this was the right thing for them. And now I only work with people that show up for me to be ready to hear this. And so my whole practice now in psychology are people who are in the process of waking up. And when we meet, that's what we talk about, where they're at in the process of waking up and what they're seeing, and how they continue to open up and see more and more of the truth about who they are. And as that happens, they begin to experience a relief, a difference. Their anxiety starts to dissipate and disappear. Depression starts to dissipate and disappear. Addiction issues start to dissipate and disappear. And so it's a very effective short-term approach to dealing with a lot of the issues that people spend years and years and years in psychotherapy to try and resolve. So that's the basic story.
I tried to interrupt you about 5-10 minutes ago because your line was dropping out a little bit. So I do apologize because that would have come on the recording. If it happens again, maybe it'll be better if we just go to audio, because I don't want people to miss what you're saying. As much as it's nice to, to have a visual, but I think the most important thing is essentially what you're saying. So if it does happen again, I'll just put my hand up if that's okay, because I don't want to interrupt your flow specifically. You mentioned about a guy who was in jail and he started to essentially just kind of, it's weird, it almost kind of just go with it, and then it's almost like life opens up to you when you go with it. Whereas I'm guilty of this a lot. We try to hold on to things so tightly. We try to control everything and we try to plan everything. But you often hear of these stories where people do just kind of let go and go with how they feel, go with their heart almost. It's almost like the universe provides. And I think that was a really good example of what can happen to someone who's, in probably the depths of despair in prison. And then all of a sudden they've got this whole new profession in the prison system. And I would imagine, I don't know if you stay in touch with this guy, but I'd imagine that he's got a whole new life doing this now. So I just thought that was a really interesting story. Just going on to the meditation stuff, like I said to you before, it's something I've been really getting into recently, but more from a practical standpoint. So I'm not trying to do like hours and hours at a time, trying to, do necessarily like, it doesn't even feel so much like a spiritual thing. It feels more like just sitting there, watching my mind go mad, letting my mind go mad, and just going, my mind is mad. And that's kind of what I've been doing, 10-15 minutes a day, sometimes a couple of times a day. And the profound experience that I've had from doing that, it's sort of changing everything in my life. Slowly. It's not as intense as an LSD experience or as intense as doing a retreat, as you said. Do you find that just doing a simple practice like what I've just mentioned, do you feel like that would have a knock-on effect to maybe kind of get to a level that you're mentioning in terms of this kind of spiritual side where you look at the personality, you break apart from the personality? Do you think that can be achieved just by your everyday man doing a day-by-day routine, or would you advocate for bigger practices?
I think if you're doing the practice and you're also studying the truth, and say the truth in my videos, I keep referring to the teaching all the time. And when I refer to the teaching, I'm not referring to anything specific. I found that the core Zen teaching, as well as core mystic Christianity, core mystic Kabbalah, pure the Advaita Vedanta teachings from Hinduism, the teachings from the East, all the Sufi teachings, that if you get to the mystical aspect of teachings, if you get to the earliest aspects of those teachings and listen directly to the words of the teacher, like the words of Jesus or Buddha or let's say, right? That it's all the same. It's all the same. But I think it's very important for a practitioner of meditation to study the teachings and develop as best of an understanding as you can about what it is that you're doing. You're practicing meditation. Otherwise, it could really go in a lot of different directions that aren't going to go anywhere. One of the things I was saying to my meditation class this morning is don't practice, don't do meditation practice. If you do meditation practice in terms of having this notion, having this idea that meditation is going to take you somewhere, that something's happen when you're practicing meditation, you're missing the whole point. The practice of meditation is the practice, and you're really allowing yourself to be driven crazy by the voice in your head, right? And eventually, over time, what will happen? It is crazy, yeah.
I've accepted it now. I'm like insane. Fine.
Yeah, most people don't know they have a voice in their head. They think that that voice is them thinking, even though the evidence is pretty clear that's not the case. It's just not the case. Can't be you thinking. If it was you thinking, you wouldn't have to look to see what it says to know what you think, you know, if it was you thinking. So it's a very important thing to understand. And then the other thing that's very important, and I say that people are practicing meditation, it can save you years, right? Is when you're practicing meditation, it's very important for you. They call it shikantaza in Zen, shikantaza. And what they mean is just sit. And when they say just sit, what they mean is have no intention, have no aspiration. Don't be looking for a result. You know, just sit and be present to the body breathing. Just do that. And what happens for most people is when they're practicing meditation, they're doing it to get something. They're doing it to get somewhere, right? It will never, ever work if that's the way you're practicing. Because the real purpose of meditation is to experience not where you could get to, but where you already are. And so by surrendering and letting go of the idea that you're going to stop the voice in your head from thinking, or you're going to, or enlightenment's going to happen to you, these are all ideas that are really going to get you nothing. The only thing that works in meditation is to just be there. Just be there sitting and have attention focused on the body breathing, because the body breathing orients you to the present moment. The body's always in the present moment. So if you stay focused on the body breathing, you stay in the present moment, and in that present moment is where you are. You're not anywhere but in that present moment. And in that present moment, the you that's there, right, is not an experience that you can talk about. It's a non-conceptual experience. It's an experience that when you wake up to it, you realize that it's always been there. It's always been the case. The awareness that is your fundamental nature, you could call it the natural state. It's natural because, you know, see, that's the thing that people don't, this is what people miss. The natural state, which is your true state, which is the reality of what you are, right? Natural state is called the natural state because you don't have to do anything to experience it. That's why it's natural, right? You don't have to do anything to experience. So practicing meditation, a lot of people have the misunderstanding that meditation is going to get you somewhere. It's going to take you, it's going to change something. No, all meditation does is lessen the distraction. All that meditation does is allow you to practice relaxed physical body and moving attention away from the constant mental activity that's producing the illusion that you're a personality, producing the illusion that you're a personality. So in meditation, all you're doing is moving your attention away from that mental process that's producing a personality and allowing yourself to sit quietly, allowing the body to relax. And by allowing yourself to sit quietly and allowing the body to relax, it becomes more possible to notice that you're here. That's all. You're here without thinking that you're here. You know, one of the pointers that one of the teachers that I studied uses to talk about this is he says, if I could snap my fingers and you would have complete amnesia. You know, it does happen to people where they lose their memory. They don't know who they are. You know, sometimes after a brain injury. right? If I could snap my fingers and you would lose your personal memory, that's interesting about that is that although you would not know who you were, you could stand in front of a mirror and you wouldn't recognize the person in the mirror. You would not know who you were. You would have no personal history at all, but you would still be in the world. You would still know the world, right? This is very interesting because if you lost your personal identity and you're still in the world, then who are you?
Yeah.
You're
And people
there.
would
You're
still
still
recognize
there.
you. Yeah.
People would recognize you, but you wouldn't recognize you.
Yeah.
But you'd still be there. So what that has to mean is your natural identity, then your true identity is the awareness that you are, not the personality. Not the personality. Most people don't understand. You weren't born when the body came out of your mother's womb. That was not your birth. You were born when about 2 years old, you got language and you could take on a name. You could start to build, you could start to construct an idea about who you are. That's when you were born. You can't remember your birth. You can't remember being 6 months old because there was no you to remember any of that. You didn't exist yet. You don't exist until there's language, until you start to think and you can create a self-image. You can create an identity in language, right? That's when your life actually begins. Right? And that life that actually begins turns out not to be real. That's why when people take on the identity of a personality, they feel incomplete. They feel something's missing. They don't feel happy. They start to feel anxious. They start to be concerned, right? And because what they're learning from other people that are also souls. They're learning from other people who believe that they're personalities, and they're also seeking to be happy. They're also seeking to be able to experience peace. And so the pursuit of happiness becomes the lifestyle for humanity. Everybody's pursuing happiness, right? In the Constitution of the United States, it says in the Constitution that you have the right to pursue happiness. Everybody's very happy about the idea that we are guaranteed the right to pursue happiness, but nobody pays attention to the fact that if that's in the Constitution, it must mean that none of us are experiencing happiness. Otherwise, why would we want to have the protection of the right to pursue it? Right? So everybody's pursuing it. Everybody's chasing happiness all the time, and they think it's associated with money. They think it's associated with having the right set of circumstances. Last night I listened to a video that's on YouTube about this guy who was he was a neurosurgeon, and he spent many years going to medical school and graduate school and residency to become a neurosurgeon. And then he spent 10 years practicing neurosurgery and spinal surgery. And he quit. He just quit. And he had no future, had no job ahead of him. He just quit. And the reason he quit is because he believed his occupation was a mistake, because he had this idea that he was going to become a famous researcher and neurosurgeon that was able to discover, connect the brain to mechanical computer devices that would allow people with paralysis to be able to move and so forth and so on. And that didn't happen. So he got depressed and upset and he quit his whole career, right? This is what happens for people. They think that if that situation didn't produce the fulfillment that I was seeking, if that situation didn't fulfill the vision that I had, then I'll have to change and I have to find a new situation that'll fulfill the vision that I have, right? This is what people do. They keep changing their partners, keep changing their cars, keep changing their lifestyle, keep changing their clothes, keep changing their hair, as if that makes a difference, right? The thing that's ironic and interesting about that is that what people are seeking, they already have, but don't know it because they never slow down and stop long enough to pay attention. Right?
Yeah.
You already are what you are. You are already free. You're already fully realized, right? But as long as you continue to pay attention to the voice in your head, as long as you keep paying attention to the reality that keeps getting generated on the nightly news and gets generated by the the humanity, right? You'll stay lost as they are, right? You have to come to understand that what you seek is what you already are. And so changing things isn't going to get you anywhere. Changing circumstances is not going to get you anywhere. You have to stop and let the body come down, let the mind come down, recognize the potential fact that you're already 100% there. You're already fully realized. And when you begin to have that experience, you begin to experience kind of well-being, right? Dr. Richie Davidson has done a lot of the brain research on people who practice meditation. And after doing research for 20 years and putting people in MRI machines, practicing meditation, he came to one conclusion. And the conclusion he came to is well-being is a practice. Well-being is a practice. And what are you practicing in order to experience well-being? You're practicing not being what you're not. That's what you're practicing, not being what you're not. How do you do that? You pay attention to the voice in your head, which is constantly trying to generate the idea that you are what you're not. It's trying to generate the idea that you are this body, that you are this self-image called a personality. And so you keep behaving as if that's the case, and that doesn't get you anywhere. It causes anxiety and depression and a lot of other serious disturbances with addiction. So people,
David, I'm losing you again.
Okay.
Do you mind if we turn our video off and go to audio? You can hear me okay, can't you?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So you were mentioning, and I'm glad you went into this because that was actually going to be my next question. So when we go into like this meditation and we have very small glimmers of it, right? And that's the moment. And the way I look at meditation is almost like I'm in the moment, and then it's like, how quickly can I acknowledge that my mind's done that thing again? And it could be 3 minutes later when I've been dragged down the road in this kind of random thought that's just a load of nonsense. And then I go, oh, I'm thinking again. And then I go back. And that's kind of all I do on repeat. I don't get annoyed. I don't get frustrated. I don't have an end goal anymore. I used to years ago when I looked at meditation, but now it's just, do you know what? I'm just going to keep coming back to the moment and just keep acknowledging when my mind takes me away. Sometimes I realize within 10 seconds, sometimes it takes me a minute. And what I've realized is by doing that every day, I now can do that in my waking day. And I've learned to kind of just acknowledge that this thing happens where I get wrapped up in this thing, and then I've gone down the road and my mind's just, like I said, it's crazy. And I don't judge it, and I don't get annoyed or frustrated. I don't even kind of laugh at it. I've just accepted that it just is what it is. And as long as I can realize that's what's happening, then I can bring myself back to, as you say, reality. What does that sound about right? Is that kind of what you'd recommend that people need to look out for when they're trying to do this practice? Or is there kind of something else that you would suggest is going on?
Well, and this is the reason why I say that you really have to study and you really have to get some good teaching. You have to find some good teachers that are awake, that can point out how this works. And if you really look closely at it, when you're sitting there and you say that you're following the breath, right, and then thoughts are happening, right, and you start to follow the thoughts, you start to identify with the thoughts, right? The reality of it is that even when thinking is happening, the awareness that you are that's aware of the thinking is not thinking. Do you follow that?
Yeah.
Even when thinking is happening, the awareness that you are that's aware of the thinking is not thinking. That's what they mean in the teaching when they say that meditation involves not thinking. A lot of people believe that means that the voice in your head should stop, that the thinking shouldn't be going on. No, what not thinking means is that you're aware of yourself as the awareness of the thinking, not the thinker of the thinking. right?
Yep.
And so if you start to recognize that, right, then you can start to experience the natural state consistently because it's always the same. The awareness of whatever is happening is always the same. It never changes. It's the only constant. It's the only stable experience you can possibly have as a human being. And it's available at all times, depending upon whether or not your attention is being taken by the thought activity and you identify with that. That's the habit. Thinking is a habit that people have, that they have taken on, and they've learned to exist as a thinker. And so if you exist as a thinker, if you're living your life as a thinker, then you're living in a thought world. And if you're living in a thought world, you're living in a world in which you believe yourself to be separate from everybody else and separate from the world, right? And if you're living in that thought world, you start to have anxious thoughts, concerned thoughts, fearful thoughts of what's going to happen to me because I believe I'm my physical body and the body's going to die. What's going to happen to me because I'm separate from everybody else on the planet and I'm separate from life itself. And so I have to be concerned and be afraid because there's just little me, and then there's the whole universe, and there's everything else, right? That all happens in thought.
Yep.
Sailor Bob Adams, who was a teacher in Melbourne, Australia, who was one of the last living people to spend time with Nisargadatta, a famous teacher in India, he says, as one of the pointers that he uses to help people see the truth, is he says, if you don't think about it, is there anything wrong with what's happening right now? If you don't think about it, is there anything what's happening right now? And if your answer is no, then the next thing that you should let yourself realize is that's always true. That is always true. So
Yep.
whenever you're suffering, whenever you're upset, whenever you're confused, you're involved with thinking. That's what's going on. You're identifying with the voice in your head, right? And when you identify with your voice in your head, and this is subtle and so automatic that you don't even notice it happening when you identify with the voice in your head, and then it takes you on a thought trip. You go on a thought trip about yourself, about life, about your family, about the future, right? And it doesn't go anywhere. Just that's why they have always said when you point out to people who are in that state, right, that it's just circular. Crazy is around and around. It doesn't go anywhere, right? And so you start to realize that if you want to be sane, if you want to stop being crazy and go sane, you have to sit still and be quiet and stop identifying yourself with the voice in your head. And if you stop doing that and start paying attention to the body breathing, it becomes easier and easier to notice, have it dawn on you that you're the awareness. You're the awareness. You're not the thinker. You're not the thoughts. You're the awareness of thinking. And that awareness is always in a state of well-being. It's always in a state of being content, satisfied, peaceful, and relaxed, right? Because there's nothing happening. There's nothing happening because what's happening happens through thought. What happens through thought. You think the world, you think the self-image, you think what's happening. Could actually say without thinking, nothing is happening. And without thinking, the nothing that's happening is you, because you're not a thing. Awareness is not a thing, and it's not happening in time. It's only happening in the eternal moment. And you are that. And when you experience yourself as that, you experience a tremendous relief. That everything that you was true, all the things that you were afraid of, you're not afraid of anymore. Death isn't real. You discover that death isn't real because the only real death is the death of the personality. And the personality was never real in the first place. So how can that die? As soon as you get that, that's the death there is. And on the other side of that, is reality. On the other side of that, you experience what is real, and you experience yourself to be real as the awareness that is aware of what's happening that never changes.
Your camera's come on again, by the way. Don't know if you've noticed that.
Okay, I didn't.
There you go. 'Cause
Notice
the sound quality went. It changed dramatically as soon as the camera come on, but it was fine though. In terms of, so with, you're saying death isn't real, right? And that's a concept that
Mhm.
you know, because I don't just practice meditation. I've been looking into this stuff for years and years, and it's only since I've really given this type of meditation without an end goal, as we've said, where I'm now starting to actually kind of see it. Like I'm starting to see what these people have been talking about, but I'm not at a point yet where it's not necessarily that I'm afraid of death, because I've been through that phase. You know, I was there a few years ago, actually, during the whole COVID thing. I don't know what it was, the craziness of the world. It just got to me maybe. And I just started thinking about that quite a bit, actually. And it was quite negative. But where I'm at now is like, I believe for what we're talking about, this kind of awareness in the moment, it does live on past the death of the body and the the personality, as we said. Is that something you look at, you think about? Do you think you know what happens, or are you kind of not too bothered about it? You're just going with the moment type of thing?
Well, I mean, one of the things that is helpful in terms of understanding that death isn't real is to understand that time isn't real. The only reality is the present moment, right? And so in this present moment is eternity. And so in this present moment, there is no death. Um, there is no beginning and there is no end. It's an infinite, eternal moment. Now, that's not something, given our orientation and given the way that we understand reality, that is easy to comprehend. So the way to deal with that, given that it's almost incomprehensible, because the reality that we're talking about here is non-conceptual, means you can't think it, you can't language it, right? So the way to deal with that is just let that go. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what you can't conceive of, and just allow yourself to be relaxed and allow yourself to experience the awareness that you are. And if you allow yourself to experience that totally and completely, you'll notice that that awareness, if you look at it, you can look at it at any time, right? And if you look at it, you can see that it does not have a beginning or an end. It doesn't change. It's totally stable. It's not going anywhere. It's not coming from anywhere. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't want anything. It just is. In fact, some teachers call it isness. It just is. And if you can settle into that, the whole business of death has no meaning. It just doesn't bother you anymore. People are so concerned about what's going to happen when the body dies. Well, nothing's going to happen when the body dies if you experience what's actually happening right now. That's what's going to happen when the body dies. What's happening right now. Nothing is going to change. And that's not something you have to believe in, because if you practice meditation, or if you practice being awake, or if you experience waking up, and you're aware of the truth as it is, you simply don't spend time being concerned about it. I had it's going on 4 years ago now. I had a diagnosis of this form of leukemia. And when I was diagnosed with it, the doctor that was explaining it to me kept saying to me, "Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions?" And I said, "No, I don't have any questions." Because my experience is that everything that is, if you see things as they are, you realize everything that has ever happened and everything that could ever happen is already happening in the present moment. And therefore, it indicates very clearly and directly that free will is an illusion. It's just an illusion. And so I wasn't concerned at all about what was going to happen. When this body is going to die, that's when this body is going to die. It doesn't matter whether I have these beliefs about what's going to happen that's going to cause it to die, or any of that stuff. And then it's been about 4 years plus since that diagnosis. And for those 4 years, I have remained with 0 stage. I've had no symptoms of this form of leukemia for the last 4 years. And the other day I was at the oncologist for a checkup, and the oncologist said to me, "Look, what do you really think about this diagnosis you have of leukemia?" And my answer was, "I don't think about it." Why would I think about it? Because thinking about things takes you into the world of thought, and the world of thought takes you into the world of fear, takes you into the world of anxiety, takes you into the world of all of the mental states that people suffer from. And so focused on what's happening right now. And obviously that's working out pretty well, because based on my blood work, although the diagnosis was made 4 years ago, there has been absolutely no symptoms.
Wow, that is quite a story. That is quite a story, I have to say. Wow. Okay. And one thing that I do think that people might worry about when going through this, and I think you'll probably have a good answer for this, like the when you get to this stage, how do you sort of, I'm saying this from still stuck in this mindset thing, by the way. So you might just go, well, I've just kind of explained that, Jay. But I guess once you, like, there's a difficulty in letting yourself go. So it's almost like, well, when I get to this stage, what, I have no ego anymore. I can't enjoy, what if I want to enjoy nice things? If I want to enjoy these things, does the meaning of that disappear, or would you look at it as, well, I still get to enjoy nice things. I'm just not governed by the thought of it, or I'm not governed by chasing it. Does that make sense? Is that a question that makes any sense?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a good question, because a lot of people who practice meditation are hesitant to totally let go, because they believe, yeah, they believe, if I totally let go, I'll have to give up all the things that I like to do and I like to feel and I like to experience, and I'm not ready to do that, so I'm not going to totally let go. Well, the truth be told, I can tell you from my own experience, when you wake up, literally nothing changes. Everything is exactly the way it's always been. The difference is the way you see it is 100% different, even though it's not changed at all. See, so what happens is you begin to see, it's kind of like you begin to see your life like you're an actor playing a character in a script, that you have a script. Your life is a script, and you're playing a character in that life. But just like actors that play characters in plays, you don't suffer what the character is suffering, because you're not really the character. You're the awareness of the character, but you're not really the character, right? So you never suffer what the character is suffering, and you can continue to enjoy what the character enjoys, right? Because you realize through the study and through the practice that everything is constantly changing. Impermanence is a very important teaching. Everything is constantly changing. And so because you can see that, and you can see it from the view that you have of that which is never changing, this is something that's very important, to understand that the reason you see change is because you're not changing. The reason you see things move is because you're not moving, right? You're the stability. You are the never changing awareness, right? And because you're experiencing it that way, when things happen that are good, that you can enjoy, you enjoy them as they're happening, and then you're able to let them go. So you're not attached to things. You're not trying to keep anything the same way, and you're not trying to stop it from changing either. That's just, now I'm saying that, but that's just the natural way that it occurs to you. You feel a sense of freedom from the need to hold on to anything or anybody or any story. You can be with things as they're happening and changing, and you begin to trust reality. You begin to trust the truth, and you begin to experience certainty about that. And so your life becomes a much more consistent experience of well-being and happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because is exactly what's been happening to me actually, with this realizing that I'm like an actor in a almost already scripted. I've recently I've been sort of stepping. I don't know if it was listening to your work which has made me start doing this, but it was around the time I found you, and I was listening to some other guy. I was reading his book. I forgot his bloody name right now, but it was about this topic. And I started to kind of just have those moments of, it's happening to me probably a couple of times a day, where I'd almost like step aside from my life instead of just being caught up in it and wrapped up in it. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm just kind of watching it, thinking this is just a play, you know, and detaching. But then what happens is you then get dragged back into it, you know. And I think maybe this is why you say you have to practice. You can't just get there and stay there. It's a constant reminding yourself, probably every day type of thing. So you're almost like building up a callus, and the more those moments may become more frequently, do they, the more you sort of go on with the journey.
Yeah, they become more frequent, and you begin to be able to learn how to move. You learn how to practice. In other words, you begin to understand that when I get upset, that is a prime opportunity to do the practice. When I'm upset, it means I'm upset because things should be different than the way they are. That's why I'm upset, right? So, but things are never different than the way they are. So if you can train yourself to pay attention when you get upset and just realize, right, the truth, right, the upset will disappear as soon as you see things the way they actually are. And
It's
so
reminding
the
yourself
practice is only necessary.
when you're
What's
caught
that?
in that moment. It's like reminding yourself in that moment is the hardest thing. That's the difficulty, isn't it?
Well, it may be in the beginning, and this is one of the reasons that the more that you invest in practicing meditation, the more you invest in understanding your true nature, that and you bring that to bear on your life as it's happening, and that it gets easier and easier. But the time will come, if you stay with it, the time will come that even when thinking is occurring, you're aware that you are the awareness of the thinking. Even when thinking is occurring, that you're aware of being the awareness of the thinking, right? And the thinking no longer limits you, because the thinking takes everything and processes it in a fixed way in relationship to your past experience. And so the possibilities for your actions in life become very limited based on what you can think to do or and how you feel. But when you wake up and you become free from that, right, then you can see possibilities you never saw before. And so you see new ways to be and new ways to speak and new ways to act in relationship to your life and the people around you. And because you have these new possibilities and new ways to express yourself that are more consistent with your actual true natural state and your true nature, life starts to get a lot more workable. Your relationships start to work, your life starts to work, and you can start to enjoy yourself.
I'd imagine as well, you start to witness your own like self-sabotagement, and you start to see the crazy things that your mind has done over your life. And, you know, maybe you learn to kind of nip yourself in the bud. Do you get what I mean? That's certainly something I've been doing recently. I'm like, I'm doing that crazy thing again. I'm just going to, you know, not give that any power, and it'll pass. And then I kind of go back to just being normal again. Like if I get angry or if I get upset, you know, sort of detaching from it.
Yeah, just let it go. You know, you can experience, you know, one of the teachers that I was studying used to say this: you can think the most terrible things, you can have the most outrageous, uncomfortable experiences emotionally, but none of that means that you have to behave that way.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think thoughts are? Because I've been thinking about this a lot. It's like the data that's around me every day just regurgitated through the filter of my personality, and it's just spewing up, you know, nonsense basically. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts of what are your thoughts of thoughts?
Well, thoughts, the way I see thoughts are thoughts before you wake up. Thoughts are solely for survival purposes. And the way it works is that the brain memorizes everything that happens to you. And what happens is there is a portion of the brain that is taking all the data that's coming into you through the senses and processing it to determine whether there's a threat or there's not a threat. And because of the fact that the brain has a negative bias, in other words, it's assuming there is a threat just in case, right? It takes everything that's happening and considers it to possibly be threatening. And then it stores it in the memory. And then as you're living life and new things are occurring and that new information is coming into the senses, right? In a nanosecond, that new information is being matched up with whatever is closest to it in your memory. So if you're experiencing something now, what will happen in the brain is whatever is closest to that in your memory will pull that up and cause you to have thoughts that are consistent with that and feelings that are consistent with that experience that you had in the past. And the reason that it does that is because according to the programming, the survival programming, if you do again what you did in the past, right, and you're still here, right, it must be because you survived. It must be because what you did in the past caused you to survive. Well, most of the time that's not true, right? That's why we keep reliving patterns of behavior, particularly when it comes to we feel threatened, that we either want to get away from things or we want to fight. And the specific form of that comes from our past experience, and it just replays when it gets triggered. But most of the time, it has nothing to do with survival. So you end up acting as if somebody's trying to kill you all the time.
Yeah. So you're looking at it as a very almost like a primitive sort of survival mechanism. Do you look at as dreams as a similar thing? It's like data being regurgitated through the subconscious mind.
The dreams is an opportunity. It's kind of a second life. Dreams like a second life. So a lot of the issues and the problems that you're suffering from in your ordinary everyday waking life, when you go to sleep, you can go into life number 2 and have experiences there that are symbolically represented, and they're intended to help to resolve some of the contraction, some of the suffering that's going on in the nervous system. One of the things that I came upon recently by a Zen master, Nitsujimi Roshi is his name. He wrote a lot of books about meditation, and one of the things that he said is it's a matter of balance. And this is very important to understand about the practice of meditation. One of the things we're doing in the practice is we're seeking to balance the autonomic nervous system, which for most of us is way out of balance. The autonomic nervous system has sympathetic and asympathetic aspects to it. The asympathetic aspect to it is the aspect to it that has a tendency to just want to be in a natural state of relaxation. That's the physical body, right? The sympathetic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that reacts to threats. And so that's the fight or flight or freeze part of the nervous system. So most of our autonomic nervous systems are in a state of imbalance and a state of arousal at all times. So we're not necessarily aware of it, but we're in this state of concern and we're in this state of being vigilant all the time, looking for something or somebody that's going to hurt me or kill me is going on all the time. And this is what our anxiety is about. This is what generalized anxiety is about. This sense that something's wrong, something's going to happen. And I don't know what it is or where it's going to come from. So by practicing balancing that autonomic nervous system, it brings us to a state in which the experience of our true nature starts to become readily available. because once the system is balanced, there's an equation. And any equation means that what's on both sides of the equation are balanced, and then what's in the middle is zero. Zero is you, the awareness. And so that's a way to talk about it and look at it and understand it, that you want to be in a state of balance, so that as you live your life, you're in a balanced state between form and emptiness. Like they say in the Heart Sutra, emptiness is form and form is emptiness. So being balanced means that you're aware of the idea of being a personality. That's the form you take to be in the world of time and space and live your life. And at the very same time, you're aware that you are not a thing, that you are nothing, that you are awareness itself. And if you can maintain a balance between those two aspects, those two realities, right, then you're living in a state of well-being.
Wow. You mentioned earlier about LSD. So I've done DMT a couple of times, which is it just takes you right there. But with things like LSD or psilocybin, mushrooms, things like this, you go in and out, or I did anyway. With DMT, you just go to like this other place, but this place feels like here and now, but in a different realm. Really strange. It felt like home. It was really weird. But when I did mushrooms, right, and I haven't done them for years because I ended it all on a really bad trip, which freaked me out, and I've kind of left that behind. But the first thing that went was time immediately, which I'm sure you've experienced, obviously, with the LSD time, the LSD days. So this, like, the sense I'm getting from this conversation is very much like the here and now, that base reality that we keep talking about. That when you go into meditation, I guess if there was a goal, the goal is to be there, to keep coming back to there. And, you get dragged away, you come back, you get dragged away, come back. And it's almost like time, your thoughts, this reality as it's playing out is like this, I don't know, it's like this artificial thing that's kind of there, that's almost like a flowing river that's just always sort of taking you with it. As you said, like, things change, your personality changes, life around you changes, but this thing is constant, and you can like jump back off it whenever you want to kind of go back to this kind of base. So it's sort of like just detaching from that. And where I'm at now in my journey is like, I'm very aware. I become aware of that, and I don't sort of punish myself. I just sort of jump on, jump off, jump on, jump off, and I try to do it as many times in a day. I watched one of your videos where you were saying about trying to remind yourself a few times a day to go back to the present moment. It's all well and good doing a meditation in the morning and then just getting caught up with life for the next sort of 20 hours or whatever. So I've set multiple alarms in the day, and the alarm comes up, it just says, do it again. And it just reminds me, just for that moment, just to, focus on my breath, even if I'm in the office and my eyes are open, just to kind of be present and tap into that. But so I'm sort of getting, the more you do that, the less, like, life is kind of real. It feels real. And until you get to this stage, it certainly feels real. But just to kind of acknowledge that that's kind of all it is. It is liberating. It definitely is liberating. So I'm just hoping, the sort of more I do this, the more I can see that, because I can certainly see it, but it's a bit hazy. Does that make sense? And I guess it just becomes clearer and clearer the more you continue the practice. But I guess the point I was trying to make with the psychedelics is that real hard line in the sand of acknowledging that time did not exist in that moment was just so profound.
Yeah. See, I think what happens is at some point you experience certainty. And what I mean by that, and that's why at one point I was suggesting to people that you take a given day and you make a strong intention in the beginning of the day to remember as many times during the day to stop and look and see, is awareness here? As many times as you can remember during a day to stop and look and see, is awareness here? And obviously every time you do that, you'll see it's still here. right? And the point of that is to develop certainty. And the certainty is the awareness is always here. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's not really true that
whenever you want it, it's there. Always.
Yeah, it's not whenever you want it. It's always there whether you want it or not. You know, it's the truth. It's the reality of what you are, and it's never not there, right? And so certainty about it can get you to the point that you come to the realization that even when you think things are different, even when you're in the world of thinking, that the awareness is what is aware of that world of thinking. So it's never not here. Even when you think it's not, it's not. It's always here. It's never not here, even when you're thinking. You know, you mentioned mushrooms. You know, given I'm 75 years old now, so back in the day when I did the LSD, it was back in the late 60s, early 70s. And during the time that I was working in my career in corrections and as a psychologist, I had to take drug tests when I was working for the prison, so I couldn't smoke pot or I couldn't take any drugs. But after I retired from that, I realized I had never experienced mushrooms or never experienced ecstasy. So about a year ago, I took some mushrooms because I just wanted to see what the experience was like. And it was interesting. I was sitting in my living room and I looked out the window and I started to hallucinate. And I started watching the hallucinations of the patterns of the flowers and the trees and everything. And then, I kind of got tired of that. And so I just, I put my earbuds in and I started listening to music. And that was cool. And then I kind of got tired of that. Right? And so I just pulled a blanket over me and closed my eyes, shut the music off, but kept the sound reduction on for the earbuds, so I couldn't hear anything. And I sat in that state for a couple of hours without moving. And to me, that was just the most fulfilling experience of nothing, of being nobody, nowhere, in no time. And it was there was a pureness to it that is indescribable. And so that's what it was like for me to do mushrooms. Most people take mushrooms or they take ecstasy or they take other things and then they party, they dance or they rave or they do things like that. In my case, I wasn't interested in doing that. All I wanted to do was sit still and be silent and experience the pureness of being itself. And there's no way to describe how fulfilling that experience is.
Yeah, no, it sounds a bit different than the last time I did it. They say to like go into it with some sort of intention, and certainly not if you've had a bad day, stressful day. And I did it with the intention to find out what happens when you die, and it was horrid. I got caught in a fear loop. It was horrible. So 3 or 4 hours, I think, I was in that. So it was really dark. It was actually a dark place, and it was actually that created my couple of years. It was around, like I said, it was around the COVID time. Couple of years of the fear of death, which took me on, many different journeys and read loads of different books and whatever. But I think you've got to be very careful with these things. You've gone in with a very sound mind, a real solid understanding of, as we said, reality. So yours was you got out of it what you wanted by the sounds of it. So I think you got to be very careful with psychedelics. And there's definitely, I think for me personally, there's a better way. Psychedelics good because it's like a crash course. But when I was doing it, I don't think I was ready. It chewed me up and spat me out and threw me back into the real world. Not into the real world, into a bigger delusional world, actually. So maybe I'll readdress this down the line. But one of my personal favorite things at the moment is to meditate with classical music on. I don't know if that's something you've ever done or you just choose to, the silence, but that's been a really good experience for me, really focusing on the body, the sensation, the breath, and just letting some really nice, soft, like classical, almost like a binaurally beats kind of thing. It does something to your brain. It just relaxes you into the moment. A little bit trippy, actually. Do you ever do anything like that in your practice, or do you kind of just keep it even more simple than that?
Years ago, I used to put on meditation music, just very slightly there, and that was nice. I enjoyed that, but it doesn't empower you to experience the absolute truth, because it kind of takes you on a nice little trip, but it doesn't really empower you to experience the absolute truth. And I have found that the only way you can experience the absolute truth is to just do the purest experience of meditation that you can possibly do, which is to sit still and just focus on the body breathing, being aware that you're not the body and you're focusing on the body breathing. The thing that's important, I agree with you, by the way, about psychedelics, that you really have to be careful with psychedelics. And one of the things that is very important to understand is that in order for you to be able to let go of the ego, and in order for you to be able to let go of the personality or the ego has to first be strong enough. If that sounds like a paradox, and maybe it is, but it's true. You have to feel that you're strong enough. Your orientation as a personality is strong enough that you don't have to feel like you're going to lose it. You feel like you can let it go and you won't lose it. That's very, very important. Otherwise, you may have some real difficult issues with mental health.
It's like you're holding on. You're holding on to it. You're not just going with the experience and sort of letting go.
Well, you're not holding on to it. You're letting it go, but you know it's still there. You know it's still there, and you can come back to it without any problem. If your personality, your ego strength is not strong enough, if you're not strong enough as a person, if you don't feel real enough as a person, then you can experience some problems of depersonalization or feel like you've lost it. So that's something that's very important to make sure that you're grounded. That's another way to talk about it, that you're grounded in the reality of the personality and the reality of the body, so that if you let go of them, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, perfect. And when you do your meditation, I think you mentioned earlier, you're just really focusing on the breath. I liked what you just said about almost like the intention of being aware that you're not your body, so you're not getting trapped in the body, because that can happen. You get irritable. The sensations are maybe too overwhelming, and you kind of can't sort of like let go in that sense. So I'd imagine that's a thing. And you do actually, I've heard you mention a few times in some of your videos about posture. That's always something I never really understood. I always try to sit up, keep my back straight. I'm a nightmare for falling asleep, so I've got to make sure that doesn't happen. But I think you mentioned before about the posture, and it's like the body and the mind connection through sitting with a straightened back and legs crossed. Do you mind just touching on that a little bit as well, just to give a bit of context to, maybe the kind of posture that you should be practicing when you do meditate?
Yeah, it's not the reason that meditation teachers teach posture is because posture matters. To have your back straight, for example, is very important, so energy can travel freely up the spine. And if anybody that knows about chakras and Kundalini yoga understands that we repress a lot of energy in the lower body, in the dantian, which is the center of energy in the body. Most of us have guts that are holding on. If the belly could talk, it would say no. Most of us have guts that are holding on, and so the posture allows the energy to move freely up the spine, allows you to experience being grounded to the earth. That's why having your feet flat on the floor if you're in a chair is important. But the best posture, the best form that I have found is sitting directly on the earth. You don't have to sit like a pretzel. You know, you can work on a posture where you can be comfortable enough with how your legs and your knees are situated, and you can get more and more comfortable with that. But the posture is very important. And I notice with my meditation classes, when they're in the practice, that the posture starts to wane. Their heads move up or down, or if they're using a mudra for their hands, the mudra goes out of form. And so one of the things that's really important to understand is not only is it important to sit in an alert way, which is what the posture is all about, right? But it's also important to stay awake about the posture. So during the time you're in meditation, you may need to make minor adjustments in the posture if you're aware of the body and you can sense that it's off balance, or you're sitting in a way that is not symmetrical. So it's very important to stay awake about the posture during the time that you're meditating, and the posture is very important. So, and I don't recommend that people practice meditation laying down. You can meditate laying down, but not until you have been more advanced and you can stay alert and awake while you're laying down. Otherwise, you'll just fall asleep.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and I certainly, you know, was this person for years, they have a complete misunderstanding of what meditation actually is. It's like they think you should be in a trance and some spiritual realm or something. But I like what you said there about being alert of the posture. So you being alert of what's going on around you is part of it. It's not this like people say, oh, I tried meditating and nothing happened. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of it. But while they think something's meant to happen, then they're kind of missing what's actually happening, which is, you know, what we said, that alertness, and that, because you need to be alert, because your mind will just drag you away and you spend 15 minutes in some crazy thought a million miles away from where you started. And that's kind of not what we're trying to do here. We are trying to be aware of that specific moment. And I guess that specific moment requires serious awareness.
Yeah, you know, people, it's interesting that you say that people imagine that meditation is like going into a trance state. Well, the truth is that meditation is about coming out of a trance state. You know, the normal way that people experience things is a trance. It is a trance. Why is it a trance? Because you're living in an alternative reality that's being created by thought. You're living in a thought world. That's not a real world. And so that's a trance. And so you're coming out of a trance. You're going sane, because it's insane to experience something that's not real to be you. So it's very important to understand that you're already, you know, it's like they quote what was a famous saying, that what you're looking for is what's looking. You're already where it is that all of the experience of well-being is happening. You're already there. It's just a question of stop paying attention to something other than that. That's all.
Yeah. And when you say that, I think unless you are doing this every day, it's hard to grasp. And like I said, it's only recently that I think I'm starting to grow. Like I probably ask you questions and you're thinking, oh, he's got a journey, you know, a journey ahead of him here. But it's so simple. It's like the most complicated thing ever.
Yeah, there is the journey is not real. The journey is not real. The journey appears to be real. But when you arrive where you think there is a place to arrive at, you'll discover that you arrive there having never left where you were.
Yeah. I love that. Well, yeah, I'm so glad you came on. I'm going to have to listen back to this a few times. I hope the first part of the recording is sound, because from my side it did break up quite a lot. So hopefully it did work out. I'm a bit cautious of your time, and over here it is Sunday evening at 9:30 now. because I'm many hours ahead of you. Is there much else that you wanted to go in or touch on, or are you quite happy to leave it there? Do you feel like you've, you know, kind of covered most of the bases?
I think so. I mean, I could go on forever. I mean, that's why there's over 600 talks, because the the truth has an unlimited number of forms to express itself. So you know, once you get involved with the truth, you can talk about anything and relate it to reality. You can talk about anything and relate it to the truth. So I don't think there's anything else I can really add at this point.
Any chance I could get you on again in the future? Maybe leave this all with me for the time being, and I'll keep homing in on everything we've said, because I'd love to speak to you again at some point, just to, I don't know, see if I can go at this through different eyes, maybe more experienced eyes as I continue. And you know, I keep saying a journey. I know you've alluded to it not being that, but I can't explain it any other way. But maybe get you on in the future and yeah, have another stab at it.
Yeah, maybe, you know, continue to do your practice and continue to study the teaching, and then maybe you can come up with some good questions that most people have, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to share your YouTube link as well. Is there anywhere else that people can find you? Is there anything that you're getting up to in the near future that you wanted to just mention as well to the audience, or?
Well, I have a couple of books. You know, the first book I wrote was called Enlightenment Made Easy, and I highly recommend that people look into the work of Douglas Harding. Douglas Harding came up with a concept called headlessness. He wrote a book called On Being Without a Head. And headlessness is a way of directly experiencing your awareness. And so I highly recommend that people check out the Headless Way. It's a website where there's experiments that you can do there that will allow you to have a direct experience of your awareness. So that book is available on Amazon. It's called Enlightenment Made Easy. And then the second book that I mentioned earlier, Dying to Live, I've gotten a lot of good feedback about it. I think the book speaks very clearly about this possibility, and so I highly recommend that people check that out.
Perfect. I think that's what drew me to your work is, I think, and you said it at the beginning of the conversation, and I can completely confirm you're right. I think you speak so clearly about this. There's a lot of wishy-washiness out there, and a lot, you know, people just on tangents for hours and hours, and you know, kind of just, I don't know, making a lot more work of it than someone like you does. You know, you really cut to it, 10-minute, 15-minute, you know, 25-minute videos, and it just really cuts to it. It's like you're speaking my language, and I think this is why you'll become more and more popular, because what you're speaking about has so much depth, but you're speaking in such a way that normal people can just understand it. It just really resonates. And when I've shared your stuff with a few of my friends, they've literally said the exact same thing. So you've definitely got a talent there. This is when you're going to say, look, I'm not bothered about talent and all of this, but you do. And, you know, you should hopefully take the compliment there. It's definitely a gift. Might have took you years to get there, but yes, really valuable, I think, your work. So yeah, I'm really pleased to have you on again, and I will get this shared, and yeah, let's see what the feedback is.